Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this first quarter webinar. We just got it in. Our webinar this afternoon is about what is new with Fannie and Freddie. Some topical stuff. Before I continue, just a few housekeeping items. We have a lot of folks on this webinar, and you are all muted. It just means that we can move through the material much quicker. If you have any questions or comments, just email me at the end. I will get those out to the group and respond to them. I always respond to my emails. So, and just to let you know, if I say something, it doesn't mean that it is the opinion of everybody. I try not to put too many opinions in here, but some of this material may include things that have an opinion. So, oh, and one other thing, like so many of you, I work out of a home office. And so occasionally you may hear a dog barking or something like that, just like you guys, right? Anyway, today, what is new with Fannie? We are going to talk about our favorite topic. I know that we're beating this one to death, the ANSI standard measurements. Another thing, the desktop appraisals, pros and cons. We are going to talk about appraiser capacity issues. I know you guys are all feeling that. And then the thing that is really here to stay for us, and that is appraisal bias. So those are the four main things that I'm going to talk about that are new or really being put forward by Fannie and Freddie. So also should have said I should be done in an hour, hopefully. So let's start with the ANSI standardized measurements. I think you would have been locked in a box somewhere as an appraiser, as a residential appraiser, if you did not know that as of April the 1st, 2022, you'll be required to use the square footage method for calculating gross living area. And it's based on the ANSI 2765. I imagine that many of you will have had some kind of class in it, or at least purchased the guide. So I just really want to hit some areas on the high level. Tell you what we're looking for in QC at True Union, what our credit union clients are looking for. I know that many of you, all of you, may measure in a totally different way. There are some of you that won't measure. There are some of you that kind of estimate it based on the county square foot. There are some of you that might measure one or two outside walls. There are some that take it to the measure to the inch. So we have no standard of measurement in appraising. And the idea of this is that if two appraisers measure a home, we should be about the same. Now, obviously, there are going to be some kind of variations, but they should be the same. One of the top 3 complaints against appraisers at the state level is the gross living area. Often borrowers, owners, buyers, sellers, whoever it is, think we're wrong. They have a measurement from, I don't know, a prior appraisal. It may be the county. It may be what MLS says, but everybody is on a different page. So there is nothing wrong with us setting a particular kind of line in the sand and saying, this is how we as appraisers will measure residential property. And the hope is that eventually everybody else, the realtors and any other interested parties, get on the same page. And so that we find that the gross living areas in the MLS are the same. It is important because I kind of stole this from somewhere, I don't know what it is, but someone said that the price per square foot is literally the currency of real estate. maybe don't look at it like that as appraisers, but everybody else, whether it's buyers, sellers, realtors, are looking at the price per square foot. The first thing you say, people will say, you buy a house. Well, what is the price per square foot you buy? Or you're building a house, what is the price per square foot? So I think it's really important that we get the main thing in there, the integral part of that, that is the square foot, correct. The other thing is, once you learn to do this and you do it accurately, and you know that you're doing accurately, this can become a book of business for appraisers. And that you can hire yourself out to real estate agents or buyers or sellers, knowing that you can accurately measure a house, and you do that according to these ANSI standards. So look at it as a positive thing. So hopefully by now you have all ordered this from the Home Innovation Research Labs. It's about, I think it's 16 pages long, and it costs you $25. And it is going to be your measurement Bible. It's going to tell you how to calculate your measurements. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And there are some continuing ed classes out there to tell you how to do it, but basically all they're going to rehash is this 16 pages that would cost you $25. So some important considerations here. In the ANSI standards, measurements are taken to the nearest inch or tenth of a foot, and the final square foot is reported to the nearest whole square foot. So you're going to round up or round down as you need to a whole square foot. So we're not going to have any decimal square foots or anything like that. It's not going to be to square foot and whatever. It's going to be to a whole square foot. And your actual measurements that you take in the field will be measured to the nearest inch or tenth of a square foot. Staircases included. This makes sense. I mean, if you didn't have the staircases, you wouldn't be accessing from one level to another. So I don't know why that wouldn't be included. Importantly, if you are stating in your appraisal report that you are using ANSI standards, and that is expected by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, then the basement area is any area that is partially or completely below grade. So no, we're not going to have any walkout basements or any of that kind of thing. So, and we'll talk about sometimes when you may not be able to comply with that ANSI standard. Obviously, I think these are pretty straightforward things. Gross living area calculation does not include openings to the floor area below. For example, a two-story farm, there is no floor area there. It is not, it doesn't exist. So it does not include that. If the property has some finished area that does not meet the criteria for finished gross living area, an appraiser may put that area in a separate line in the sales comparison approach. And that really kind of comes into effect sometimes where you have attic spaces which are finished and they may be being used, but they don't meet the criteria of gross living area. And so you might kind of slot an extra line on your sales comparison approach for that attic, and that's perfectly acceptable. Thank goodness the ANSI standard is not required for desktop appraisals. I think there was some kind of controversy on this. I think at first they did think that they wanted it, but it's not required. You're going to be relying on a desktop appraisal to people who are unlikely or may not actually be able to measure to that standard, may not be knowledgeable to do that. So it's really kind of important. So that's a kind of important thing. One thing that many of us have probably been using at some point, but is very clear in this ANSI standard, is what I call the 7-foot rule. And kind of got a picture of a house there, and you can see that, and I'm pointing at it, but you can't see me point at it. But basically, finished areas must have a ceiling height of at least 7 foot. So if you've got a room and it has a sloping ceiling, at least 50% of that finished square foot must have a ceiling height of at least 7 foot. So if it doesn't, if you've got a sloping ceiling where you've only got, you know, I don't know, a quarter of it 7 foot, it may still be finished area and you're going to be slotting that square foot into that extra line on the sales comparison approach. Now, the finished area that is included in GLA must have a ceiling height of 5 foot. So what that means is that you measure from where that 5 foot mark is. So it's as clear as mud, right? We have, over the years, I've heard so many different ways of doing these attic spaces. I don't know, I think the counties used to take 1.5 or 1.25. There are all kinds of weird ways that people would do it. So it's pretty straightforward in ANSI. It's pretty clear. And if you go to the actual guidelines, there's some pictures there that show you exactly how that works. So it shouldn't be too complicated, but it is you remember, at least half of that area must be 7 foot, and then you measure from the 5 foot. Clear, right? So some other consideration, this ANSI method applies to single-family homes, townhomes, co-ops, and condominiums. It doesn't apply to two-family dwellings. I would hope that everybody on this call, and you are all our panel appraisers, know how to measure the house from the outside. You measure the perimeter, and there is some really good advice. You probably have been doing this years, but you can use a traditional tape, big 100-foot tape, or I think it really does save time if you've got a laser measure. You know, what I always found is you measure one part, one outside part, and you write down the measurement, and then the next time it just makes sense not to try and keep it all on your head because you won't remember it. There are specific considerations and mentions on how to measure dormers within the guidelines and additional spaces, and also how to calculate exterior dimensions using interior measurements. You may be measuring a condominium or something like that, or you may not have access inside. You might not be able to get to the outside to measure it, and so you'll have to use interior measurements. I think you add a foot, something like that, to make it. So it's very specific, and I don't want this to be a class on how to measure according to ANSI standards, but those 16 pages do tell you how to do it, and it's very clear. It's not an odd thing, and in every circumstance you've got to look at how you do it. Now, unfortunately, we all know that houses are not square. They are not made out of little boxes. There are all kinds of properties, and if you feel that you cannot measure to that ANSI standard, you've got to state that in your appraisal report. So where I think where you get into some dangerous things is when you have some form of circular thing. Calculating angles can be difficult, circumferences, radiuses, and things like that. And the other thing is that Fannie and Freddie do require that the sketch be completed on a computer program. So no more are we any hand sketches for you guys. So I think there are some clear things that could be complicated. You have to provide a disclosure within your report. This is really, really important. If you do not provide a declaration, and they're listed on page 3 of the ANSI standard, on how you calculated your square foot, it will void any claim of adherence. And that is explained, as I said, on page 3. The declaration must include, if your calculations are based on measurements, if they are based on plans, you may do this on plans and specs, or you estimated it. And it must include a statement on rounding to the nearest square foot. And you also have to put the areas that are finished above grade and below grade. So explain what the demarcation between above and below grade. Also, any area that was considered finished but is not included in your square footage. So that might be that attic area that you have not included actually in your gross living area. And then a declaration on any interior spaces that you can inspect. So, and then how you calculated based on that. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. And there is no specific wording for it, except to say whether you calculated on measurements, plans, or estimate. They include that, but you've got to have a pretty clear statement in your appraisal report on this. And where you want to put that it is up to you. Some of people I've seen already are putting that into the USPAP addendum. Some are putting it in additional features. At some point in the future, you probably won't get a choice on where you put that. I don't know if you read Fannie's recent, I think it came out yesterday. They are getting very close to providing the new 1004 forms. Really, basically, they're getting rid of the addendum. So you're going to be putting any explanations right in the area. Right in the area of the form. So interesting to look at. Not being covered in this webinar, but that will be, I'm sure, the subject of another webinar. So here is that page 3, and you can see they've got 3 different declarations. 1 is when you are measuring. 2 is when you're based on planned dimensions, and 3 when you're estimating. And then it includes what to put in that statement. But the most important thing to remember, if you don't have this disclosure in your appraisal report, it voids any commitment to ANSI, to the ANSI guide, the standard. So very important that you have this in your appraisal report. So what if you can't comply with the standard? We talked about roundhouses. That might be difficult. I really think one that you could have a problem with would be kind of a berm home or something where, if you comply with ANSI standards, you have no square foot, right? It's all below grade. So you may decide that you're going to have to step away from this standard. And if you do, you must provide this code, the GXX01 code, in the additional features, and then explain why compliance was not possible. This is very important. This is the reports when they go into the UCDP portal. We scrub for this. They will be expecting if you did not comply for a reason why you didn't comply or why you couldn't do it. So very important that you have that. So I think that's about all I want to say about the ANSI standards. It's all in that 16 pages, and there are people who are a lot smarter than me who are teaching classes on this. But I really wanted you to know the main things that we are expecting. We will be looking for that disclosure in your appraisal report, and trust that everybody has practiced enough and understands how to use the ANSI standard. Some of you may have been using it already, so I may sound like a broken record. So let's talk a little about desktops. I'm going to put this to one side a sec because I I like a lot of you. I follow some of the blogs, appraiser blogs, and belong to some of the Facebook groups. And I heard an appraiser, or it was somebody described this. He said, they were talking about, wow, desktop appraisals and, and ANSI standards and other stuff that everyone's talking about, they feel bombarded with all this stuff and how does that impact the profession and everything. And someone said, well, it's a little like being, dating your high school, it was a girl, lady, dating your high school boyfriend, and he's scared to break up with you, so he just is really mean to you. I don't think that is the case here. I don't think Fannie and Freddie are being really mean to you. It's just that there is a lot of things hitting right now. I'm going to talk a little in a moment about appraiser capacity, but some things that are happening right now, I think, have to do with appraiser capacity and also the potential for bias in appraisals. Freddie Mac already has, in effect, desktop appraisals. Both of Fannie and Freddie have. Sorry, I just looked at that date. I taught this class before one did, and the other one had already. So yes, these are in effect right now. What will really happen is that they're only on purchases, and the lender will be offered the ability just to have a desktop appraisal rather than a full appraisal. It's up to the lender whether they want to go for this. I am going to tell you that many credit unions tend to be pretty conservative, and they may not go for this option. They see some of the obstacles with it. The idea of this is really to provide some kind of flexibility in the process. The recognition is that appraisers spend a lot of time in the field, and the process of providing traditional appraisal reports is very time consuming. Inspecting properties, doing your ANSI measurements, and driving comparable sales and everything else that you do is very time consuming, and that if we take appraisers out of the field, in certain circumstances, it may improve some of that appraiser capacity. In other words, you may be able to do more reports. The other thing is that they see it as reducing the potential for appraisal bias. We're going to talk a little about this, but that many accusations have been in various newspapers. There are several court cases right now, and people have talked about removing kind of evidence of the racial makeup from homes and getting a different value. So the idea is if you're not actually in the property, it may be able to reduce appraisal bias. I don't personally buy that much because I think where I see appraisal bias is more in neighborhoods than anything else, than maybe individual properties. So I hope this doesn't come out, but it may just be that well, desktop appraisals are here to stay, but I think there's some difficulties with them. And the main thing I see as being difficult is this software generated floor plan that includes interior walls, doorways, staircases, exterior, interior ingress, and the dimensions of the exterior walls. But you're not supposed to inspect the property. So I have a bit of an issue on that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Also the fact you have to include a front, rear, street, kitchen, bathrooms, and main living area photographs. And you may not rely on an extraordinary assumption. So you cannot assume that it's in average condition. You cannot assume that it's a Q2 rating. You cannot assume that there are 4 bedrooms. You cannot assume any of that. You have to verify it. And then you have to verify any data from an interested third party, the buyer, seller, agent, whoever's going to make money out of the transaction. You're going to have to verify that. So it's kind of interesting. There are a lot of checks and balances on this desktop appraisal. So the form that's going to be used is the 1004 desktop. It is different from the traditional 1004. It looks much the same. Really, absolutely looks the same. If by mistake you inspect the property, you cannot then report it on a desktop appraisal. There must be no physical inspection by the appraiser. Most importantly, this is incredibly important, that you must have sufficient information to develop a credible report. If you're unable to, for example, absolutely verify the condition or the quality or the room count or the gross living area, anything, then you know, time out. You can't come up with a credible report. So you must really have enough information there to do that. It may be used on new construction. Where I see that is probably production building and appraisals for production building. And this is going to be submitted into the UCDP portal. One thing I will say that over the last 2 years, the COVID years, as I call them, there have been a lot of appraisal waivers. That probably has been Fannie and Freddie's way of alleviating some of the appraiser capacity issues. The problem with appraisal waivers is that they are not feeding the model, the UCDP model. So they have to do appraisals of some sort to get that information into the portal. And I think that's a lot of this, that yes, some way of alleviating appraiser capacity, but still have an appraisal report, still have all that data going into the portal, and being able to make risk decisions based on that information that is going in there. When you don't have the information going in there, it's not as reliable. So I think we'll see less appraisal waivers and probably more offers of a desktop appraisal. So one of the things that is very important is the verification of any data you get from an interested third party. Now, understand that verification is not replicating. It doesn't mean that if someone tells you the square foot is, you know, 2,400, that you have to go out there and measure it to verify it's 2,400. There are other ways. There are ways of verifying and not replicating. Really important. It's verification and not replicating. There are websites with aerial and street levels. There are photos. I've got that spelled wrong. Floor plans, and this imagery generated third-party applications that we're seeing pop up. They call it 3D scans, and I think this is kind of interesting because I see a couple of very, very large, I don't want to bash really large AMCs, but I've seen a couple of very large AMCs purchasing, I think someone just purchased Cubic Casa, and someone, I think Class owns another one. And what I see as that the large lenders, the very large lenders, which is, you know, I don't play in that ballpark, some of you don't either, but the Rocket Mortgages, the Chases, and all those big banks, you know, use some of those really large AMCs, and they have access to some of these 3D scanning things. And I'm afraid, I had thought that probably the software companies, the appraisal software companies, would pick up some of this 3D scanning information. I don't know if they have. It may be something that you want to ask Alamode, because what I'd hate is that that my clients, the credit union clients, are kind of excluded from that kind of information because it's just sitting in that big bank world. So I think we really need to look at that, because I know many of you that work for us don't want to work for Mr. Big Bank and some of these kind of very large AMCs. You're more comfortable working in the credit union field and that kind of thing. So so there are also, I see, some kind of remote viewing through a virtual inspection. I see people maybe with, I don't know, what's it called, FaceTime or something like that, doing a virtual inspection, which is probably works fairly well. People are looking at houses like that. That's how they're buying houses. So although I would have to say that, hey, if I'm a buyer and I've got the appraiser and I'm walking through the house on FaceTime, I'm probably sitting there thinking, well, why am I doing the appraiser's job? But anyway, there are some kinks that need to be worked out. The best thing I can see is a prior appraisal assignment. If you've done that, you've been in there, and providing there's a fairly limited amount of time from when you did that, I think that information is very good, and you've seen the property and you know that. So as I've said, that floor plan must include those interior walls, doorways, sketches, staircases, everything else. And, that means that whatever you're doing to get the information on the subject property from your desktop has to be fairly detailed. And I think it has to be very user-friendly for whoever is providing you with that information. So we'll see how that goes as we move forward. So let's talk about appraiser capacity. When I wrote this class, and I originally wrote it actually for one of our credit union clients and their group, I kind of typed in appraiser capacity, and I don't know if you know on PowerPoint, like sometimes you just get a design, and what happened was I got all these bottles, and I just laughed, and I thought, yeah, there we are. I think that really says something about appraiser capacity. Everybody is drinking a lot right now to get through it. You guys are so incredibly busy, and we might kind of worry that things are going to change. And any of us that have been appraising know that you have some dry times and you have some busy times, but we've been busy for a very long time. And I just know, in fact, that there are not enough appraisers out there. And right now, I'm going to show you some of these numbers. And I know that maybe some of you guys are from Tennessee on our call, and I've actually got some numbers in Tennessee that kind of show this. Right now, there are only about 40,000 appraisers in the United States. And that number has stayed pretty stable since 2014. We have lost some appraisers. They've retired, but there have been some new ones. So it stayed pretty stable. But how many of those appraisers, that 40,000, actually appraise single family homes? I know many appraisers that would not have a clue how to appraise a single family home. They are only commercial appraisers. There are people like me. I hold 5 appraisal licenses. I don't do any appraisals anymore. And there are tons of people like me that for whatever reason, they're reviewers, own appraisal, whatever it is, they don't actually do appraisals. Or if they do residential appraisals, they do not do mortgage work. They do a lot of litigation or something like that. And probably over 20% of appraisers only perform commercial work. So take all that out of there, and you kind of, we're talking about a lot less to do the mortgage work. And then appraisal volume, 2020, 2021, and we're looking at it still in 2022, is higher than any time in the last 10 years. But the number of appraisers have remained the same. And Freddie Mac has produced some kind of really cool kind of graphics to kind of show this. And if you look here, you can see the amount of appraisers, that yellow line, the ones with unique licenses, has remained pretty much the same. But you look at the volume levels, and of course, a lot of that was purchase. But you can see even I mean, a lot of that is refi, but even the purchase has gone up. And I can tell you, that kind of stopped early 22. You're going, as you see the real estate markets to kind of start coming unclogged with maybe a rise in interest rates and more homes for sale. This is going to keep on increasing. So yeah, there is an appraiser capacity issue. And this graphic here, it showed back in from 2012 to 2019, kind of annually how many appraisals appraisers did in each state. Now these are appraisals, that are submitted to the ECDP portal, right? So on average, say when we look at, I want to concentrate on Tennessee here. On average, an appraiser in Tennessee between 2012 and 2019 would submit 150 unique appraisals into the portal. Now, you look at that into 2020, and you see that's gone up to 235, and everywhere's gone up. So obviously the volume in each state has gone up. So I kind of dug into this a little more because I thought, well, what does that mean on a per week continual basis? So I looked at Tennessee. Tennessee right now has 894 certified general appraisers and 977 certified residential and 93 licensed. We kind of take out 25% of the work as non-residential mortgage work. We're left with 1,473 residential appraisers. So it works out, if you do the yearly basis, right? It actually, so we did in prior to 2020, we had 1,964 doing, I worked out the assignments here. So in 2020, we have 461,540 assignments. Break that down amongst the 1,400 appraisers, and it leaves 313 appraisals per year for an appraiser on residential. These are the only ones going into the UCDP portal, which is about 6 a week. So for 52 weeks of the year, these are only the ones being done for secondary market guys. They're not FHA, they're not USDA, they're not, loans that are being, shelved. These are just the ones going into the UCDP portal. I think there's an incredible amount. You might say, oh, I'm doing 10 a week, I'm doing 12 a week. Are you doing it 52 weeks of the year? Where are you guys getting a break? When do you take vacation? When do you take a day off? This is not giving you any opportunity to do that right now. So yes, I would say there is a capacity issue right now. So, what are they talking about? How can we alleviate that? I hate me for saying this, but I have actually advised in the last 2 years just to keep you guys from being able to work and not burn out. I advise, can you use, if a lender can use an AVM or appraisal waiver, do it where they can. And I think that has probably helped in the last couple of years. Otherwise we would have, you guys would be burnt out. We'd have ridiculously long, turn times on people's closings, wouldn't make it on time, and the whole system wouldn't work. Well, obviously also they're thinking desktops are going to introduce hybrid appraisals. There probably will be reduced loan volume at some point. Some lenders are looking at staff appraisers. I mean, you look in all the ads, everybody's looking for staff appraisers. But what will probably happen is we probably need more appraisers, and we have to eliminate some of the barriers for entry into the appraisal profession. There is no doubt right now, you guys know it, you're appraisers, but you're the lucky ones. It is not easy to be an appraiser, is it? For-year degree, you know, for most, and all those appraisal classes that you slog through, the exam, and then the experience requirement. So I do think, coupled with the capacity issues, and then that coupled with the appraisal bias, we are going to see some major changes in appraiser qualifications, and probably the biggest change will be in some way to eliminate the experience requirement. I think it's ridiculous that we would expect someone to traipse around for 2 years with another appraiser, sometimes learning their bad habits. I think there are other ways that we can do it a lot more efficiently. So wait for more news. I'm not quite sure how that will come about and what that means for existing appraisers. Please don't shoot me. I am just the messenger. So let's talk a little about appraisal bias. And I know this makes most appraisers, they get very defensive on this. And I get it. You guys adhere to USPAP, and USPAP is about bias, right? That's the whole point of having an appraisal, is to prevent bias. You are not allowed to advocate for anyone except your own appraisal. But time and again in the media in the last year or so, there have been examples of appraisal bias. And I say racial bias. The other thing is the makeup of our profession. 77% of appraisers are male. 97% are white. And when you have that kind of breakdown, you know that there will be accusations of appraisal bias. And this is an incredibly hot topic right now. And it is being looked at by the government. It is being looked at by Fannie and Freddie. The Appraisal Foundation has a lot of explaining to do on a lot of it. Especially as far as USPAP is concerned, you're going to find you have more education on this, and there will be a definite movement towards more diversity in the appraisal profession. As an AMC, we are expected to have policies to prevent appraisal bias. The states will be looking at appraisal bias. Your reports that are going into the UCDP portal will be scrubbed to look for appraisal bias. On the slide is my actual favorite TV show is CBS Mornings, and yeah, I was really shocked when this came up in one morning. And this is how it kind of started. It started in the New York Times with an accusation that a black couple had an appraisal done, and they thought it was low, and they asked for a second opinion, and they removed all evidence that they were a black couple, pictures and decorations and things like that, and the appraisal came in higher. So this has been shown in different areas. There are examples all over the place now, and people are definitely looking at this. So if you get, I can send you a copy of this PowerPoint, and you can listen to this or watch this story. I'm not going to run it right now, but it is pretty important. So The evidence of bias and there's a lot of research being done on this, and it goes back a long way. So there is historical evidence that even after the passage of civil rights laws, appraisal discrimination continues. And please remember, as an appraiser, we have to follow fair housing laws. One of the areas that is seen by many of the researchers as a key problem is the sales comparison approach. Because there are, what they say is, because there's broad discretion in the sales comparison approach, is a key fair lending risk factor. So, what do I say about what do they mean by that? I think a lot about the way that appraisers are drawing boundaries in neighborhoods. It is simulating actually a lot of the boundaries that we're seeing when mortgage lenders redlined. So that is being looked at as a key risk factor. Fannie and Freddie have scrubbed their reports, and they still see a lot of race-related language in there. Like, I can't believe this, but Black race population above the state average, these are examples of what they saw. Storefronts supporting Jewish households, predominantly Hispanic, more Asian inflows of late. Cannot put that kind of thing, obviously, into an appraisal report. The key one that they've really kind of attacked the appraisal foundation on is in USPAP. It says you must not include any unsupported evidence or information related to race. And what is being said is, oh, by definition, that means it's okay to put a supported facts in there, the evidence race. Well, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be able to do that. So yeah, we have some way to go on this. So the other thing is that Freddie Mac did a survey, and they said appraisers were more likely find the appraisal value fell below the contract price in Black and Latina census tract. So again, your reports going into the UCDP portal are being scrubbed. They're looking at the census tracts, and this is kind of one example where it showed that percentage of appraisers were lower than the contract price, was higher in Black and Latino areas. That's data, that's facts to support it. There is a very sharp gentleman called Dr. Andre Perry, who works for the Brookings Institute, and he's been talking about this for a long time. Before this kind of became, what it is right now from a New York Times article, he has been talking about, and he's actually given evidence to a Senate hearing, and he wrote a wonderful book about it too. But he has stated that the average loss in home value in Black neighborhoods is $48,000, and that amounts to $156 billion in cumulative loss. So it means that and think about this, if homes in predominantly Black or minority neighborhoods are underappraised, even if it's 15%, even if it's 10%, and he states it's more likely 23%. And this has been done for a very long time. You have to look at the loss to those neighborhoods. People build wealth in their homes by equity in their homes. If they're not able to access that equity because it is continually undervalued, they can't invest in other things. They can't invest in improving their homes. They can't invest in small businesses and whatever it is. And this has a huge, huge impact. So I think, yes, this is a major thing. It's a major thing being looked at right now. And you cannot hide or put your head under the sun. So here's the demographics. Do we need to say any more? 97%, I'm sorry, I said 70%, I said 77% were male, 70% are male. So yeah, those are the actual statistics. So as I said, this has gone, further than the Appraisal Foundation or the Appraisal Institute or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And Maxine Waters, who's chair of the Finance Committee, wrote a very strong letter to the Appraisal Foundation. And the culminating sentence I put in here, and she said, in the coming months, my committee will convene hearings, advance legislation, and continue working with stakeholders to end housing discrimination and hold the appraisal industry fully accountable. And this was in response to a letter that was written to a researcher and by an appraiser, and the appraiser basically just ranted and raved about a lot of racist things, and the researcher sent this to Maxine Waters, and this appraiser is an MAI and highly qualified, but sent this incredibly discriminatory letter to the researcher, and that kind of thing just kind of dots the I on this. And as much as we, I'm sure every one of you on this call will say, I am not discriminatory, and I'm sure you are not. But we have, as an industry, got to face this and face the fact that we are not a diverse industry, that we don't do anything in this profession to encourage diversity, whether that's minorities, maybe more women, and that because of that, somewhat we are, capable of discriminatory practices and need to change what we do. And I think we are going to have to very quickly. It is something that does not go away. And some of the potential solutions that are being looked at is this comprehensive overhaul of appraisal qualifications, standards, and practices. There will definitely be some changes to USPAP, and I think there will be major changes to appraisal qualifications. We know as an industry, we're policed by our own industry. Everything stays in our industry. The Appraisal Foundation is made up of appraisers. Our state appraisal boards are made up of appraisers. And so we've kind of been looking at it always, I think, as appraisers. And it's not a bad thing to have somebody outside look at it. We have created a cottage industry that does not encourage diversity. I always say, if you're a college grad coming out and out of college, say, I don't know, you're in Austin, Texas, or you're in Knoxville, Tennessee, or Columbus, Ohio, and you have a great 4-year degree, and you decide you want to be an appraiser, and you have a really good GPA, you're a smart person. Are you going to really go work for somebody and say, you're a woman, you're a Black woman or whatever, you're going to go work for that guy in his basement who's going to pay you, as an independent contractor? And, it's not conducive to bringing new people in. Our industry is. We have to remove barriers to entry. I've always been one that's for the 4-year degree, but I think that will probably be changed. And I definitely think the experience requirements will be changed. There is no doubt we have to improve appraiser diversity. Our profession has to look more like the United States of America than it does right now. And there has to be a recognition that there is a risk of appraisal bias. And that's not anybody's, it's not, you can't lay fault with people. It's just that sometimes in our methods and techniques, it leads into that. And that is going to be a key takeaway for examiners. The bank examiners and the credit union examiners are going to come in and look at that in the financial institutions. So we are going to be impacted by that. And finally, this is from yesterday. This is the New York Times, and it continues. So I'm not going to, it's just, you can pull it up on the New York Times. It's, you know, they're talking about desktop appraisals and how they may reduce, you know, appraisal bias. And I think that that's what they're going to push a lot of it to say that it will. I'm not on 100% on that page, but it's there right now. So this article is dated March 21st, 2022. It's not going away, folks. So that is, I think the accusation of racial bias in the appraisal profession, out of all the four things that we talked about this afternoon, I know to you maybe the most important is going to be measuring the house properly. But this is going to be the biggest impact to our profession. It's not going to be desktop appraisals. It's not going to be, you know, bifurcated appraisals or hybrid appraisals. It's going to be this, the accusation of racial bias in our profession. That is what's going to change. I could be wrong. You contact me in a year's time, say, hey, Sally, you were wrong. But I think that's going to be the biggest impact. So with that, I am finished. It is very close to 1 hour. I really appreciate all of you being on this webinar this afternoon. We appreciate you working for TrueUnion. We, you know, we enjoy each one of you. We love talking to you. Please feel free to send me an email, and we will have this, we're going to do this again on Thursday, and after that we will pop this up on our website so you can access it on our website. But I'd love to hear from you. You can text me too, that's my telephone number. And guys, thank you very much for joining us, and please be safe out there and enjoy. We'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.